Haemorrhage, also known as blood loss, one of the most used status effect in the Elden Ring. It builds up with every usage of weapon, skill or spell that can inflict it. Once the blood loss meter is filled, the effect is triggered and the target takes damage equal to a percentage of their max HP.
Theory of bleeding is pretty straightforward and simple. You hit something and it bleeds. Easy as that? Well, not really. There are some details that are not properly described in Elden Ring. But let's discuss basics first. First thing you need to know about bleeding is that it is not inflicted with every hit. It's a buildup instead. Have you seen this meter before? That's your bleed build-up meter, and every enemy and boss has it. Bleeding to your target, you need to constantly deal damage to it with bleed weapons, skill, or spell. What's important while using weapons? There is no difference in terms of bleed infliction regardless of light or heavy attacks. Each hit counts the same way. Once you fill your bleed buildup, surprise, surprise, you deal bleed damage. Same as with your character. Once it's dealt, you can immediately start working on second bleeding on the same targets. There is no cooldown. But still you need to be rather fast about it, because bleed build-up decrease over time. About 7 bleed build-up points per second. Wait, what? Bleed build-up points? What is that, you ask? Well, I made that name up, but what I mean is amount of bleed you inflict with a single hit. For example, with a single Reduvia hit, no upgrades and 989 Arcane, I can inflict 77 build-up points. That's not bad, but it can be even better with upgraded Reduvia. We have 90 build-up on +6, and 989 on +10. Well, that's great. So what does this number depend on? To answer this, I will need a little help. Hello, Albert.
To inflict bleeding, you need weapon, skill, spell, or even consumable that uses this effect. For example, there are many choices of special weapons that have bleeding effects from the beginning. Also, every weapon that can be infused with bleed affinity gains bleed effect. For example, this long sword. It does not have bleeding effect on it by default. But once you infuse it with blood, it gains bleeding passive effect. Every weapon with bleeding effect have a base flat amount of bleeding points. Take Reduvia as example once again. It does have a flat 51 build-up points. Base amount means no upgraded weapon, with only minimal arcane required on a character. On my character I have only 13 arcane, which is minimal required to a Reduvia. Look how little blood build-up increases on upgraded versions of weapon. Now 99 arcane on my character, Look how different blood buildup looks here. That's all because of Arcane scaling. If bleed weapon is Arcane scalable, higher level means more bleed buildup points. Some of weapons has better scaling than others, and some doesn't has it at all. Like a gas wheel. Even though it's a bleed weapon, it is not affected by Arcane. So, no matter how you upgrade it, bleed buildup points can be changed here. It's a flat 70, and always will be. So, we already know on what build points depend. But what does it actually mean? In short, more bleed buildup means faster bleeding. Basically, if you have 2 times more bleed build, you can expect bleed infliction with 2 times less hits. Stat which describes bleed resistance as robustness. Your character and every enemy has some robustness. Robustness can be increased by adding points to endurance. Robustness is dependent mostly on your armor set you wear. The General Red set and Lionel set both share the highest robustness stat of any armor set. There are also some other wearable and even consumables that increases robustness stat. The way it works with bleeding is as shown. I use Reduvia with 77 bleed build points. Godric the Grafted has 318 resistance points to bleeding. Okay, let's inflict some. In order to inflict bleeding, you need to apply total value of bleeding that is higher than its resistance to it for a given enemy. Pretty simple, right? Well, yes, but still, there is more into that. To show this better, let's choose a bigger fish. We're in Khalid, Sleepy Dragon. There's a lot of health, and it's the easiest enemy to do a little experiment. What we want to do here is inflict some bleeding, but let's count how much bleed points it requires, and count each hit. Again, I'm using the same Reduvia as before, with 77 bleed build upon each hit. Dragon has 711 resistance points to bleed. On new game it's 627 resistance, but as I'm on new game +5, it's slightly increased. So, I should expect 10 hits to inflict bleeding. Dragon's dead. We managed to kill him in 7 cycles. But as you can see, the numbers doesn't add up. The reason is robustness scaling. On 2nd and 3rd infliction, it actually increases bleed resistance after the first bleed on the same target enemy. To inflict 2nd bleed, you need to deal around 1.5 times more bleed points. And to inflict 3rd one, you need to deal around twice as much. And that's a cap. Every next bleed infliction requires same amount of bleed as 3rd one. But it still seems strange. Why do you require so many hits on 2nd next cycles? The reason of that is bleed decrease over time. The longer a cycle, the more time for bleeding to decrease. That's why you need more hits. Well, I believe it's a good time to talk about damage dealt by bleeding. As you probably know at this point, bleed damage is a percentage loss. For a normal enemy you can expect 15% of its max HP being lost of each bleed infliction. And for bosses, you can expect 10.5% of its max HP. Sleeping Dragon, as an example, is being considered as a normal enemy, so with bleed infliction it will lose 15% of its max HP. You can actually see slightly higher number of damage with bleed infliction. That's due to your weapon-based physical damage being dealt alongside bleeding. So, if Dragon has 114,078 HP on New Game plus 5, you will deal over 17,000 HP to him with pure bleeding. An additional around 100 to 350 damage from your weapon. This number will vary depending on weapon, particular move, and some other variables. Anyway, this gives us pretty big number. As you can see, bleed is pretty strong, especially for enemies with bigger health bar. And that's only for one infliction. That's all. My job is done here.
Thank you, Albert. As you can see, bleed infliction is rather simple, but the more you go into details, the more complicated it becomes. That's a very powerful status effect. Please use it with caution. That's all we've got for you today.